and our esteemed leader of all of America's health. At least I believe that to be the case, Dr. Satcher. Give him another big hand. For all who have done for our country and indeed the world. And remember, he's probably the first and only Surgeon General that whose name I could remember. And at that time, I was about to college graduate, as they say, and probably in law school. No, I was out of law school, practicing lawyer, but you know, that's the other one, Coop. I might remember him too. We all might remember Coop. But in any event, your name is the one that sticks out above all in the history of all these Surgeon Generals, and we thank you for all that you've done here at the Morehouse School of Medicine and throughout the world. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming and bearing with me. As Dr. Treadwell said, you might see me on television acting up, so you might not know I really am a good person. And I thank you all for supporting my show, those who might watch. And as you might see on the show, a lot of those folks are having fun, and so am I, because these are small claim cases. These are life-determining cases. No one loses a fortune, no one goes to jail. So we have a little fun with the cases. But off the bench, you should know, as Doc just introduced me, that I am indeed a fighter for social justice. And although, once again, I laugh and joke on television, there's really nothing funny about what we're seeing in our community, particularly with the health care disparities and with the prison industrial complex that now is devouring the heads of our households, or the would-be heads of African American households, to an extent that it creates an environment that is not conducive to the well-being of the health of our community. So I'm going to speak from that frame of reference. I know you all are going to have enough medical experts to speak about some of the nuances of how the health is affected by not practicing good dietary and health and fitness processes in your life, and many of the other things that will become more in depth. I'm going to speak about what I know about, and that is the justice system, and particularly about the crisis of the black male in the justice system. And I know many of you might say, well, what does that have to do, Judge, with health in jail and health in the general and larger population? Well, I'm going to tie that together very quickly. You should know that those households that are headed by single women, nearly 70%, the majority of those women are living in poverty. Poverty breeds health disparities. If you're living in poverty, of course, you're one of the 42 million who can't afford health care. If you're living in poverty, you're living in many instances in conditions where those who do not have health care like you might have contagious environments. Those might be living in unhealthy environments with rodents, with roaches, for lack of a better term. What do they call roaches now? Give me the proper word. That's what they call them. Even when you have a PhD, they're still roaches. All right. Roaches and roaches and roaches. But many of you in the profession know that roaches contribute to asthma for our children. Lead paint, which is still in the older homes and have not been removed from our impoverished community, contribute to the health disparities in our children and those in the non-African American community. So poverty contributes to poor health. And how is our community affected by the prison industrial complex as it relates to poverty? Well, if we look at the status of the black male in America, we find, and I'm just going to run through some of these statistics real quick because I want to get more into the root cause. But we find that nearly 60% of the prison population is made up of black men who represent less than 6% of U.S. society. We're 12% as a people. 7% is more women than men. 7% women. 5% men. 5% of the U.S. population. 60% of its prison population. What is the effect of that? Well, the effect is, as it relates to health, is one, we have poverty, disproportionate poverty, single-family homes. And then, of course, and this might be somewhat controversial, but it's true, we have a higher rate of HIV and AIDS. Because in the prisons, men engage, many of them, very many of them, in homosexual activity. Many of them call themselves heterosexual, and they're just engaging in homosexual sex in order to either survive the attacks and the intimidation by those who would otherwise sexually assault them, or out of necessity for what they believe is human sexual exchange. And so, and I say what they believe to be because some would argue that prison sex out of necessity with another man and you're not homosexual, then there's a controversy there as to what's really going on. I believe we all are tolerant of homosexuality, or you should be if you're not. But as a necessity to survive a prison industrial complex culture, I think there's some controversy there. And so what you have is so-called straight men who leave prison after having homosexual sex, come home, greet their women, the women waiting for the man to return, anxious, visiting with him every month, writing and talking with him on the phone, has no idea the sexual conduct he's been engaged in, and so she allows unprotected sex. I'm not sure, Dr. Satcher, do they allow the distribution of condoms in all of America's prisons? I'm not sure. Some states, but for the most part, they don't. So you really have a bigger issue for those states that do not allow the distribution of condoms in prison. And so they return home and infect their women. That's why the majority of all new AIDS and HIV cases are infecting black women. Not black men, black women, not gay men, not gay black men, not straight black men, black women. And so that is one of the ramifications of this prison industrial complex where we make up 60% of a prison system, but only 5% of society. Now let's take a look at where those numbers might emanate from. Why is it that our men make up such a large proportion of the prison system? Why is it that we have so many fatherless homes? Well, many of us here are social scientists. I believe if we take a little moment, that we can figure it out. If we look at a couple of basic factors we might get it figured out. If we look at the unemployment rate of African American men being 30% or slightly higher, when the unemployment rate for the rest of society is 5%, I think it may have went up a percentage point or two in the last couple of months. When we look at a system where in New York City alone, over half of the black men in New York are unemployed. Now, we're all the social scientists, some of you, let's put on our thinking caps. Let's start with this premise. You cannot believe that 50% of the black men in America, 1/3% in America, 50% of the black men in New York just don't want to work. You hear that sometimes. You know, you hear that from folks who don't want to really delve into it. Oh, they just don't want to work. They're lazy. Want to drink beer and smoke that weed all day. Half of the men in New York want to do that. Half of the men. I might have a few that I'm trying to rescue. But not half. You cannot convince me that they're unemployed because they don't want to work. So what is it? Well, if we look at some of the historical reasons, we can find a little insight there. But we don't even have to go as far back as slavery and the programming of the black man as a stud who was good for nothing but breeding, and who also is to be torn from his family because that was the practice of slavery. And some say that legacy still from time to time roars its ugly head in those who have been programmed in centuries earlier and have not shaken off the shackles of slavery. But we don't have to go back that far. Let's look at today. Because I suggest to you that much of the unemployment is a result of denial of equal opportunity. Some say, oh, here we go. Want to blame racism again. Now, we thought we settled that with Barack. We thought we went into that booth and closed that curtain and then it'd be all over with. Well, we think we've had progress, and we thank God for so much progress, but racism still exists. That's why it's nearly 100,000 claims pending at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission right now as I speak. And all those claims of discrimination aren't lies. Once again, can't convince me that 50% of the men in New York don't want to work, and you can't convince me that nearly 100,000 claims pending in Washington, D.C. at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are people lying and imagining discrimination or playing the race card. And then, of course, we look at something that is quite unique to black men, and that is the stereotypes that society uses to alienate and reject many brothers from participation in mainstream society. What are those stereotypes? Well, you've heard them before. He's angry, hostile, aggressive. Stereotype. All black men aren't angry. They don't want to get to work and fight you. Well, they might have, you're worried about them. I don't know, he might remember what happened back in the old days. He might just go off. That's not the case. We can look past that and build on the future. So we don't want to go off on you when we're working next to you. but we're not going to take any disrespect. We've seen that movie before. And so that stereotype. And then you have the stereotype that black men are sexual predators. They want our women, always looking at them. And I can't do nothing about it because they're angry and hostile and might whoop me if I say something. So the best thing I can do is not hire him at all. If you tell me I gotta hire somebody, I would rather have the black female. She's not gonna whoop me. She's not gonna be looking, for the most part, at my women. And then I can get a little peek into at her. No. I know I'm having a little fun with you. It's so much so serious in society today. We have to throw a little Judge Mathis colloquialism in there every now and then. But once again, I'm convinced that there's a fear of black men in the workplace and in other sectors of American society. And it is that fear that causes black men to feel that they're alienated, rejected by mainstream society, and so they internalize that pain. And they live in a society that says, you are a man. You are to be the head of your family. You are to take care of your wife and your children. That is the definition of a real man in American society. And then the very masculine model that you set up for a man to be, you take away his ability to achieve that. When you can't hire a man, he can't get a job, and you've set this paradigm up, and you're not a real man unless you have money to raise your children, unless you have money to head up your household, then what do you think is going to happen? He's going to internalize that pain. He's going to go and try and drink his problems away. He's going to go and try and smoke his problems away at the crack house. And instead of fighting back against alienation, mainstream society's discrimination and rejection, he instead internalizes that pain and turns to a subculture of self-destruction. And so that's what we see happening with many of our brothers that lead them down the path of the prison industrial complex. But you know, I'm not one, as you've seen, and those of you who have heard me speak, I'm not one to blame society or the government for everything. The government's not putting that crack pipe up to your mouth. The government isn't running behind you, showing you where the cocaine is to sell on the streets of your community. Every now and then they might hand you some from across the border when they need money for the Contras. I'm not going to go there. Y'all going to say the judge accused the CIA of selling kilos of cocaine to young black men in Los Angeles because they needed to raise money to fund the Contra war because Congress and others would not provide monies, and so Ronald Reagan and Oliver North were complicit in the selling of drugs to American cities so that they could raise money to fund an unauthorized war. I'm not going to say that. And so, our brothers must fight back. You can't blame everything on society and on government. I mean, you claim to be so tough, and we have to challenge them. Brothers walking walking around with their chest stuck out, talking about they want respect, they have a reputation. Some of you all who've been around on the streets, you know that that's the profile. Brother Valentine, you know that's what they're walking around up. On the corner, stuck out like that, blaming everybody, feeling sorry for themselves, not showing it, overcompensating with the super macho attitude, and then get into these drug wars after not only serving death through drugs to their community, then they want to kill innocent women, men, and children in particular through their drug wars. And that's not courageous. That's no way to fight back. Instead of fighting back with the gun, drop your guns and pick up your books. That's how you fight back. But instead, this fear factor. I say that America is fearful of black men. Well, it's the other way around as well. Black men are fearful to fight back against the rejection and alienation that they might feel. So they fall once again into the subculture, doing drive-bys, hitting our young children, fighting their drug wars. And there's nothing even brave about a drive-by. What that sound like? That don't even sound right. Talk about you tough. Well, if you're so tough, why you doing a drive-by? Stop and get out the car. Do like the cowboys. Cowboys should have two guns on their side. They look each other in the eye. They say, whoever gets the kid first, let's march in front of each other, then you shoot and kill. Whoever's left standing, that's who won. Amen. Now, the judge not encouraging shoot each other in that manner. But I am saying it takes no courage at all to drive by and hit a stray child over your drug wars. That's a coward. Driving by. If you want to drive by so much, drive by Iraq. Drive by there. They want those stray bullets that hit Bin Laden or his crew. She like to drive by. And so I challenge, and we must challenge. Well, I challenge. I don't know if you all can talk like that. I said they know I'm right there with them, or I used to be, and I can talk to them in this way. You all put it a little more polite when you get to them. Talk to them nonetheless. And let them know that real manhood is demonstrated by fighting back against that which would destroy you and your community. And you fight back through the number one way of upliftment and empowerment, through an education. Folks say, Judge, how did you come from the streets and 15 years later after coming out of jail become the youngest judge in Michigan history? I said, well, it's because I dropped my gun and picked up my books. Wasn't because anything special about me. It was because I worked hard. I was blessed, I believe that to be the case. But it was because I used my mind. And so that's what we must encourage our brothers to do, because we see that there's a prison complex that's waiting on them. We see a government that has invested more in the incarceration of our young people than the education of our young people in the last 30 years. We've seen in the last 30 years a 300% increase in the buildings of prisons, where the buildings of schools has rarely kept up with the rate of inflation. In every state in America, there's been an increase tenfold in prison spending over education spending. They're investing more in the incarceration of our youth than the education of our youth. Where I'm from in Michigan, for example, last 30 years, 227% increase in the prison budget, 23% increase in the education budget. And of course, you all know whatever state you're from, when there's a budget squeeze And it's time to go for some money, they go for the most vulnerable in our society. They go for Medicare, Medicaid, and education. First things they go. So you can't quite convince me that there's a focus and a practice of equal education opportunity. Of course, we know that since desegregation and the orders that were later lifted, we once again have every school district in America that is made up a majority Latino or black has substandard curriculums, weaker and less trained teachers, and less funding. But yet they're asked to compete against those privileged who are receiving more funding, better teachers, and stronger curriculums. So what does that lead to? How does that become a fast track to prison? Substandard education. Well, let's take a look at it. And I'm going to close in a minute. But if you take the jobs out of an inner city community, as we have seen with this information age and the de-industrialization of America, removing the jobs from the inner city, replace the jobs with guns and drugs, then you fail to educate those. You cannot expect anything other than a disaster. You remove the jobs, replace them with guns and drugs for folks to kill themselves with, and then those left standing, you put them in this prison system that is now privatizing the prisons all throughout the world, making paying the prisons $1 a day to make products that have been sold on the open market, making money off the misery of those who failed to educate. That's what we see. That's why we have 80% of those in prison have no GED nor high school diploma. That's why we have a healthcare disparity where those in prison, nearly 1/3, have behavioral disorders, or let's say a claim, have mental illnesses. Nearly 1/3 have mental illnesses, many of them undiagnosed. And then we send them right back on the street, sicker and slicker than they were when they went in. Not even investing in rehabilitation. Instead, warehousing them in jail. I want to buy the criminals off the street, but I don't want you to send them right back like they were. And I don't want you to keep using my tax dollars to fund this revolving door, where 70% of those released from prison go back within 18 months because they have no job, no opportunity. You know, I will give, just today, we have to give credit to Can't Get Right, because today he got it right. He did. He signed the legislation, the Second Chance Act. But I call him Can't Get Right. He got this one right. I don't care what I say today. I'm praising him with that. Give the president a hand with that. He got this one right. And that is, for those who don't know, he passed the Second Chance Act. It was a bipartisan between Congress, both houses of Congress, and of course, he praised the act and looked forward to it making a difference, and talked about how we need to invest more in rehabilitation, how we need to invest more in helping those ex-offenders once they are released to find housing, job training, and many other necessities that they need to become productive citizens so that they don't go right back into prison and come back out, knockers in the head, going out
more than the $165 million that was appropriated for it. Because after all, we have 700,000 criminals being released, or offenders being released every single year. 700,000 coming out. We need more than $165 million. We need to address this as the real crisis that it is. But that's a good start. Next, we can find employers, perhaps, who will hire them, because that's one of the other main obstacles to re-entry. No one will hire you. You don't have a skill, you don't have an education, and you have a strike on your neck. So even if we do help them get a skill and an education, we still need folks to hire them. Well, what do we do with that? And y'all need to send me up there at some point. I come up with these good ideas. Send me the comments, Brother Valentine. You gonna talk me up on the radio? No, I got send me the comments with these ideas. We need to give tax credits to employers who will hire ex-offenders. We give tax credits to everybody else. Why can't employers get tax credits to hire ex-offenders? It makes us safer and it reduces our tax burden. You say, well, Judge, how does it reduce our tax burden? I'll tell you how. I don't want to get too personal, but I use my testimony as an example because I believe that's why God gave me this testimony. But at age 17, I spent 9 months in jail, 1977. I'm told that it cost some $70,000 nearly to house me in jail for 9 months. Well, judge gave me a second chance, told me to get a GED, and he would release me as a condition of that. Got my GED, I think I went a little further than the judge ordered. Then enrolled in college. Well, my cousin tried to enroll me in college. What are you talking about? College is for rich kids. I don't have any money. I'll take this little GED. I can go to the Army if I can. Well, the Army rejected me. I said, no, you got to read it. Then I take it. So I said, I couldn't even get an Army. I got a GED. How would he said, well, they have this program called affirmative action. Not so bad, is it? I was accepted on the affirmative action program, still didn't have any money. Student loans, grants, had to access those. Well, taxpayers had to pay for that. You all, or your parents. No one's old enough to have had to pay for my college in 77. You all, none of you taxpayers, forgive me. But taxpayers had to pay for my college education, and how much was that? It was a lot less expensive than housing me in jail. The 4 years I spent in undergrad at Eastern Michigan University cost $24,000. 4 years of loans and grants, $24,000, 9 months, $70,000. Then, of course, through law school. Costs a little more there, of course. But the point is, it was more cost efficient to educate me than to incarcerate me. Because not only am I not knocking you in your head, but I'm a pretty decent taxpayer these days, helping to relieve the burden of many others. So that's what we must do with many of these brothers and sisters who are returning to our communities with no job, no training, and no education. So as I close, I want to send a message to you all and to convey that our brothers, that they can fight back and overcome the obstacles that stand in their way. If it's racism and discrimination, then join the NAACP. Join the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Join Rainbow Push Coalition and fight if that's your fight. If that's what you believe is holding you back. If it's unemployment, then start where you can till you get what you want. These women out here are working 2 jobs, raising children by themselves. Some are even going to school. And you don't see them on the corner drinking wine or smoking crack unless they're following some no good man. And so, brothers, we must strengthen our other brothers who are falling by the wayside and are causing the domino effect of poverty, disease, AIDS, hopelessness, and despair. Because if we let them know that we have seen that movie before, then they'll go to the same theater and they'll come out looking for the new opportunity. And that opportunity is here and now, and we must encourage them to find it. Thank you. God bless you all.